Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of the Business Barbershop Podcast. I am Chris.
I'm Keen.
And we have a guest here today, Tim Samuels, which we're going to hear from here in a minute. Before we get to him and his story, as always, if you like what you're hearing, if you have people that you think might want to hear it as well, share it with them. All right, that's it. Okay, so Tim is Keen's guest. I just met Tim about 3 minutes ago when I walked in the door 10 minutes late. And I'm just going to give it up to Keen to get started, and we'll just see where this bad boy goes.
Yeah, Tim and I have both been. You're at Cobalt before, also.
Yeah, I touched
Yes.
base there for a little bit, and I think it was kind of in the time when they were going to make a move to a different company, and so our branch didn't last very long.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you've been a mortgage lender like me for a while. How many years?
19 now.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
we're close. Yeah, I've just passed 20 years.
Yeah.
You know, you got a full head of hair than I do, but
Don't look in the back.
So tell me a little about your history about when you came into being a mortgage lender. Like, what got you into the space, right? Because you've been a top producer for a while, right?
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
and also, Tim's also part of the same coaching program. We're both core students. Are you still into core?
No, not right now, but I go to the summits.
You still go to summits? Yeah.
Well, they're honestly, to get all the information you get and to be able to really truly implement everything I want to do, it seems like going to every summit is probably the timeline I need.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The last summit I went to, I made the decision to look at, they do those tests. It's like organization, money, sales test, whatever.
Yeah.
And it always seems like you want to put emphasis on like who gets the best on the sales test. But my big aha was do everything in reverse.
Oh, really?
Yep. Because if you think of like a jar and you're trying to fit as much shit in that jar as possible,
Right.
sales is like the sand
Mm-hmm.
or the water maybe.
Yeah.
And then like, the other stuff is kind of like the rocks and the sand or whatever. And it's like if you fill it full of rocks first, like your personal stuff, then it's easy to knock that stuff out. It's easy to go from like
That's a great way to look at it.
you
Yeah.
know.
I know the analogy, like how to do that.
Yeah.
It's the stuff
But the
that
sales
fills in
stuff,
last.
it's like you're already so busy doing sales stuff. You try to add more to it. Then by the time the jar is full, you try to squeeze in the other stuff. There's no room for it.
Right.
So
That's a good way to look at
it. My big aha was just do it in reverse.
That's a good one. That's
Yeah.
a good one.
Yeah. So yeah, what got you into being in the mortgage space?
I was actually selling cars,
Mhm.
and the guy that was doing my personal loans just one day he was like, "Hey, when are you leaving this? Come work for me." And I was like, "Well, I kind of like it here. I'm doing a good job. I'm selling a lot of cars." He goes, "Hey, no matter the job you do," and it's not a knock to it's my buddies that still sells cars, but they go, "Hey, you're still always, no matter what, the best integrity, the best presentation, the classiest you are, you're still gonna be a used car salesman." And I was like, yeah. And he goes, "You got to close somebody here within 3 hours or they're probably not coming back, right?" And I said, "Yeah, that's true." He goes, "I've got 30 days to work on a deal. I've got a lot longer timeline. And I know I'm more relaxed and I'm better off than you are." And he was being a little cocky, but it was also true. He had the proof. So
Still in the industry?
No, he's not.
Retired?
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. So he was your first branch manager?
Oh yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Hired me on. I mean, just I was getting my loans from him, made stuff happen. It was great. Do I understand the process back then? No, because it's totally different from today. I mean, did I sign all my disclosures and things like that? Probably not.
Yeah.
Do I remember when we locked a rate? I don't. Not like today where we are so transparent.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, gosh, guys, there's nobody that can come out and say, "I didn't know what I was signing. I didn't know what I was reading."
Right.
Because you probably e-signed it 15 times.
Right.
So different world.
So it's interesting. So that shop was like a brokerage, or what was it?
That was a place called West Sound Bank.
West Sound Bank.
Yeah, I loved working there. It was fun. We had all the culture. It was cool.
A-paper loans?
Yeah, A-paper. We did construction.
Yes, he was a good lender all the way. I got into space freaking making cold calls for the subprime shop. I didn't know.
I mean, it just good stuff. And then the problem with that was I loved it there, and we did everything. We had this reputation of getting anything done. But then the FDIC came in and said, "Hey, so the way you're getting it done just isn't the way it should be done, and we're going to close you."
Oh, really?
So they closed the mortgage division, and that was super tough because that was like 2 years into it. I've got a 4-month-old at the time.
What was the issue?
It ended up being, and it's still, I mean, you can Google and read the articles because I don't think anybody was ever going to really know what happened, but it had to do with the board and probably overextending credit in certain markets. I know that a lot of our products were set to be sold to Countrywide, and then Countrywide cut off the faucet, wouldn't take anymore, and so we end up just holding the bag.
What was that? Was that right around the same time the subprime meltdown with everyone else?
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Makes sense.
Yeah, that was a quick springboard.
My first mortgage job was working for AmeriQuest.
Okay, yeah.
And I became a manager because that's what you do when you realize that you're probably too good of a salesperson to stay a salesperson there. And I remember going to corporate, and they told us, and this is funny because no one, I think one person wrote in a book about it, but it hasn't ever got popular. All the Big Short and the margin call movies or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
No one talks about this. WAMU, which was at the time the second biggest bank in the country,
Yes.
was
And their subprime affiliate, Long Beach.
Yep.
Yeah.
They basically funded more than 50% of all the subprime loans back then.
Yeah.
And at Countrywide was a very small player in that space.
Yeah.
But so if you looked at the list from 1 through 5, Countrywide subprime was number 5. Number 1 was AmeriQuest / Argent / whatever, right?
Mhm.
And then
Yeah.
New Century, right? All these subprime lenders. And at corporate AmeriQuest, they told us that more than it was 75% of the paper was going to WAMU.
Wow.
And it had to do with the fact that they were a thrift savings loan bank, and thrift savings loans bank had to have a certain percentage of their business be in home loans
Mm-hmm.
to expand. That's how they got so big.
Yeah.
Which is why brokers who would broker to Long Beach Mortgage, which is an affiliate, like you mentioned, the rumor on the broker world back then was that if you had a big subprime loan and you had a hard time making it work, send it to Long Beach, they'll find a way.
It's the truth.
Because it wasn't units, it was volume, and the volume allowed them to open more branches and whatever. And that's why remember how there was the too big to fail thing?
Mm-hmm.
People were wondering, why was WAMU not too big to fail? It's because they were so toxic they couldn't be saved. So you just had to let them fail.
Right.
Yep.
I remember funding one through Long Beach, and when I worked at the bank, and I helped the guy get a second on vacant commercial land for down payment on 20 units, 5 fourplexes. And so he got 100% financing. He walked out of escrow with his earnest money and purchased 20 units.
Wow.
No skin in the game. And subsequently, obviously, I think there were some losses, later, but it's crazy. We followed the guideline.
Mm-hmm.
That was their guideline for lending. That's the type of financing we arranged was totally acceptable. They approved it.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's a crazy world back then.
Wild West.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I think it's one of the reason why the commercial industry is going through pressures is because they still are kind of operating in a Wild West type atmosphere.
I could see how that's true because I know when I've applied and got commercial financing, compared to what we do in the residential area, man, it is so easy.
Mm-hmm.
It is so easy. It's truly a debt service model. They look at the income from it versus the debt they're going to have. They still have an appraisal done, but
debt service, we actually had this conversation in our last show. Debt service is a problematic way to underwrite the deals when they all have balloon loans.
Very true. Very true. I mean, the ones I've gotten, they wanted historical financials, so they wanted the seller's tax returns to look at too, to prove hey, you didn't just bump up your rents all of a sudden to qualify or something really quick. They looked at historical income.
Well, it's all the people who bought and it met the debt service requirements when rates were low, and so they just don't when the reset comes.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I've got a few. Thankfully they're years and years out. So it's going to be good. But yeah, I think right now retail space, commercial, yeah, really good. Like we were talking about.
Yeah.
I mean, in-person services, boy, why would a salon or a clinic or anything like that has to have a place for them to get up and be tired of where they're leasing and go to a different location just for better rent, the same rent, lesser rent per month, the amount of TI and moving and stuff like that far outweighs it.
Yeah, it's one of the things. So Tim, our portfolio, so he's an investor just like I am, but portfolio is very different. So you have out-of-state investments. Let's take a step back. What got you into investing in real estate as a banker? Because it's more common, by the way, that a lot of people aspire to be real estate investors to become brokers, which I think is hilarious because I think brokers are the hardest ones to get freaking qualified.
Oh, yeah. It's, all my investor realtor friends, I mean, gosh, you guys are just herding cats, give this to me. Let me help you.
Yep.
And then we put them together and they buy great properties most of the time.
Right.
So no, I got to start before I became a lender.
Okay.
A friend of mine, named Tom Cash, what he basically told me is like, dude, why aren't you buying some like rentals and stuff like that? You make a lot of money. And I was like, huh, yeah, okay, I should do that instead. And then scraped and saved and
What was that?
bought the first duplex. That was probably 2003.
You guys early. So
Yeah.
you did that before you got in the industry then?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. While I was selling cars, you know.
That was one of my regrets. I didn't get into it sooner.
Really.
I came into it really, really late.
I wish I would have bought more at certain times. But I definitely
Like
think
2010.
Yeah, I mean, even then too, with income being down, I bought a couple properties. They've been great for me. I've still got some of them. I mean, they've done really well.
So to pause for that, there's Chris and I have had these episodes where we talked about how investment should feel like this absolute no-brainer, where you understand these metrics, you look at them, you go, hey, this is whatever, right?
Right. You can tell black and white.
Right.
Yeah, easy.
So I remember, case studies like in the stock market, the two of those moments for me was I was kind of a video game dork when I was in high school, and every good video game on your computer ran off of DOS. And so I remember when they talked about Windows 95, to me that was like I knew what that meant. Most people didn't know what Windows 95 meant. It meant that in the PC world, everything was going to be point click, just like a Macintosh with all the power of a DOS system. I'm like, this is game changing, right?
Yeah.
And I remember thinking, like, you should buy Microsoft stock right now. And, of course, it, like, split, like, 3 times in the next 2 years. And then I remember when I was working at Magnolia Hi-Fi a couple years later, I remember everyone walking in with these freaking iPods, and how do I get this music onto my car? And I remember thinking to myself, like, this is probably the time people should be buying into Apple, right? Like, they're doing something special, right? And right? So my real estate version of that was when we're doing loans back in 2010, right? Chris, you're gonna laugh when you hear this. I remember the rent markets had shot up a lot because you'd get all these high income earners like at Boeing or whatever who would get foreclosed on, and so they became renters.
Yeah,
and so
they still needed a place.
So rents were getting jacked up. Yeah. And so you get these lifelong renters who have never had any aspiration to being a homeowner, getting pushed out of the rental market because of all these high income earning. Because when they got foreclosed on, they didn't jump off a bridge, right? They went to rent, and then they reset their credit, and eventually came back into the market.
Still making good money,
right? So there's a transition period where there were people who made too much money going into the rental game who couldn't get back into homeownership even if they wanted to because they're too close to their recent default.
Right.
And in that little window, real estate prices had dropped so much that in 2010, I remember seeing this. I have 2 people come in, and they were old first-time buyers. These would be like 50, almost 60 years old, and this is literally the home buyer conversation we would get. I can't afford to rent my apartment anymore in Kent, and I want to see if I could just buy a house. And we would get them on down payment assistance. They could buy a small single-family home in Kent for about $190,000, $200,000, right? Yeah. And it was cheaper for them to buy that house and pay monthly payments on a zero down loan than it was when they were renting an apartment in the same city.
Yeah.
And that's when I said, I don't care, because at 2010 we didn't hit the bottom yet. It was still just a slide.
No, it was coming. Yeah.
Yeah. And I remember thinking to myself, like, I don't care what anyone says about shadow inventory or any of this bullshit. There are so many renters who just create this floor, like, and this is their income. It could be like Tim and I could be best friends and be like, you work at Burger King, I work at McDonald's. As long as we're both working 40 hours a week together, we could buy that house. Yeah. Minimum wage. You could buy 2 people on minimum wage could buy a single family home with no money down back then in King County. And I said to myself,
and it's not that long ago when you think about it. That is not that long ago.
No, 13, 14 years ago is when I realized this. And I remember thinking to myself right then, just like I did with the whole Windows 95 thing and Apple thing, I said, this is when you should be buying shit, right? This is when you should be buying shit. Now, I didn't buy a lot back then. I tried to open a mortgage brokerage in 2007, so I'm still reeling from my debts then. And also, I didn't get out. I didn't claw myself out of the hole I was in until about 2011. Yeah. But it was in 2010 where I did that math, and I said to myself, like, I don't care that if we're not at the bottom. People should be buying now. You should be buying as many as you can from now until they realize that it's not going to stay this cheap, because all the shadow inventory doesn't replace the shadow inventory of renters who will just, like, they won't raise prices, but they're not going to let them go down any further.
No.
Right. And so, and it was spot on. It was just like basic economics. And that's one of the things that was probably one of the first moments that I realized that my knowledge as a banker was an insight to economics that was not apparent to traditional economics. I would talk to, I would see people who do like economists talk about inventory, all that stuff, but there's an affordability factor that goes into
Huge
real
right
estate values that we understand more so than other industries, because we, when people say like, oh, prices can't go up anymore in King County, I say,
Hold on.
I see their income. They can afford it.
Yep.
They can afford it. The easy answer is if people make a lot of money, they can raise prices.
There is a lot of money out there. I was just talking about that with some guys this morning. There's a lot of money out there. One title rep I was talking to this morning said he was an open house for a builder, and one property had two side by side. One was 3.1, one was larger at $4 million. Went to open houses last weekend, and they were packed.
Yeah.
And they weren't looky-loos coming through to get free lunch or something. Mm-hmm. He said that on the more expensive home, they already had an offer. They were coming to terms on it, but the guy was writing a check. There was a ton of money out there.
Yep. People can afford it, and we see it.
We do.
And, that's why I realized that the knowledge that we're like to pause and look at what we're looking at with our clients, right? That we're not going to give any one of our clients specific income data, right? It's all private information, but we can gather as statistics and say statistically, right? We know what people who work at Boeing and work at Microsoft and work at Amazon, what they can afford. Which, by the way, I'm not sure if you've ever experienced this. In the last, I'd say maybe 10 years or so, there's been a shift. And I remember some of the biggest doom and gloom people in the Pacific Northwest are old Boeing people.
Yeah, oh yeah.
You know why?
When Boeing had their falling out, in the
it's hilarious.
The 70s, yeah.
So, for anyone who thinks that there's a doom and gloom coming and there's like this lack of affordability, it was really a transition of who the upper middle class was. Mm-hmm. That for decades in this area, if mom and dad both were mechanics, not even engineers at Boeing.
Oh, machinists.
Yeah, machinists.
Yeah. Unionized, everything.
They could own
Great
a nice
jobs.
house, 2 relatively newer cars, and a boat, right?
Yeah.
Go on vacations with the pensions, And so them being squeezed out of the market of affordability is why they believe collapses are so capable, is because they don't understand how affordability can exist, because they remember where it was affordable and their life was great, and now their quality of life keeps shrinking.
Well, it's almost like everybody's toughest place to invest is their backyard, because you get the case of, I remember when.
Yep.
Hey, I remember when the house sold for $60,000. Now it's $600.
Right.
Or they have that thinking like, hey, it should never go up in value and price except for what I own.
Right.
And
too much of personal bias of their own experiences. People always give advice on their own personal experiences. Right. I mean, I'm guilty of it too, but I think to try to put yourself in other people's shoes. In our position, right, we're constantly looking at the income of the people that we're helping. Mm-hmm. And you're right. Like, I think that to be able to buy a nice single-family home in a good neighborhood in King County, man, the one people, it's not as easy. No.
What do you see like an average price, like a 3-bedroom, let's say 3-bedroom, 1 or 2 bath, home that you'd live in, probably needs some updating. Starter home, yeah.
Yeah, 6, 7.
6, 7, yeah.
Yeah.
I'm over, west side. So I would say the numbers are a lot less for now. I would say if you can find something that you live in, you need to be $350 to $400.
Yeah. I mean, what's the economies that support? So Tim you work in the Kitsap area, right? So you got like Bremerton, Orchard.
Silverdale, Port Orchard, Paulsbo, Bainbridge, basically from the Narrows Bridge to the Hood Canal Bridge. Bridge.
What are the economies that really support that specific market? Because, one of the things I've always found attractive about Bremerton, even though I've never bought anything there, is that for like landlord expenses, the tax rates seem to be really low.
I think that kind of goes around the sound, coming from, like you start in the Port Angeles area and you come down around. Port Angeles is very inexpensive tax-wise. Then you start to come down to Kitsap, it's a little more. Then you start to creep into Gig Harbor, it increases. Mm-hmm. You get around, and then you get around to King County where it's even more expensive. So it's kind of like a loop, for affordability, I think.
I think there's a misconception when it comes to expensive taxes too. Like a lot of people in Pierce County will accuse King County of having expensive taxes, but I don't agree with that. The taxes are really a function of 2 things, which are value and then the levy rate.
Right.
And so when I say that Kitsap has affordable taxes, the price points are more affordable, but that's not all. It's like the levy rates are low.
Right.
King County's levy rates aren't high. Like Seattle's levy rate is usually less than 1%. Some people complain about Seattle taxes. I'm like, actually, relative to the value, the taxes are pretty cheap.
Yeah.
You know?
And we've got, as you know, Kitsap and the other areas grow, they're going to catch up to where you have to have taxes for, you know, services to keep up with population. We're just not as populated as a Pierce or King for sure.
Not as
But
dense.
it's going to happen. Yeah, not as dense. You know, I wouldn't say rural, you know, but you know, it's not nearly as populated as like Pierce and King.
Yeah. So, and you also do out-of-state lending or out-of-state investments. You have stuff in.
I do lending out of state and investments out of state for
Yeah.
sure. Yeah.
And so you know, where are some of the places that you see outside of Washington that's a good place to, because your investments, have they been mostly like a cash flow play? Is that what you mostly focus on?
Yeah, out of state, it's been for cash flow. Just because I think I could probably manage, like if it was a flip or something like that in a different state, I probably could, but I still have that misconception. I would need to be there on site and take a look at it, you know,
Right.
kind of routinely. One in my own backyard, hey, I flipped a manufactured home that was only 3 blocks from my own house. You know, that was super easy. Walk up there with the dog. Hey, yeah, things are going well. Things aren't going well. I'm good.
Yeah.
No skin off my back. So out of state has been purely cash flow.
Yeah.
What states have you purchased property in?
Montana and Arizona.
Okay.
Arizona has been more of a challenge because I set that up more like an Airbnb. And then the market did get pretty saturated with it. You're getting people that are pulling out of the short-term rental market. Personally, I'm switching who my management company is in Arizona to a different company, smaller company. I think can get more attention to my property. So I'm hopeful that they can return a few more bookings, just to the point really where it breaks even to goes into the positive for cash flow. Because ultimately, I want to live in Arizona too.
Yep.
So I kind of want to buy a house
I'm doing
well
the
in
exact
advance.
same thing right now.
Really? What
Right.
city?
Phoenix.
Phoenix, yeah.
My family lives there. My fiance's dad lives there, and so we're looking.
Yeah. John was thinking about doing the same
Basically,
thing, but Tucson.
Trying to do kind of the same.
It helps in
thing.
the transition because if it can cover the debt,
Right.
you know, I'm happy with it. And then when people are down there, a good property manager for a short-term rental, they're going to see it every time it's turned over. Hey, we found that somebody broke a chair.
Right.
All right, we're going to charge them. Cool, thank you.
Yeah. And see, I'm trying to also want to have a place that we can just go to as well.
Totally.
Now, you know,
Yes.
like and Phoenix is convenient because it's an easy flight. You know.
Yeah, we're 2.5 hours maybe.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
I
It's easy to get to.
I wish I'd at least tried to get something there earlier.
Yeah, for sure.
They've done a good job of closing the gap. For as much as Seattle's been a strong market, Arizona's closed the gap a lot in terms of the price point. Because Arizona was one of the 3 desert states that was hit the hardest in the Great Recession.
Yeah.
Nevada,
they were really
Florida,
hit.
and all 3 have rebounded really well.
very well. I wish I could have bought when I wanted to buy in
Oh my
Arizona.
gosh!
I wish
there were
I could have
houses
bought,
in
you know?
Orlando that used to sell for
Yeah.
$50,000
Yes.
in Orlando.
Yes.
Yeah, we've had conversations about this. I'm curious about how you choose markets, or how you choose neighborhoods. You know?
Markets and neighborhoods?
How do you,
No, that's
do you
a good
just
question.
Do research and just sort of curious.
I do research. Being down in Arizona, like we would, you know, Keen and I go down for like the coaching seminars and
Yeah.
everything we belong to, and you really get the exposure to Scottsdale and
Yep.
Maricopa County, Phoenix, everything. And it's like, yeah, this is great.
Yeah, I
you know?
lived down there. I clerked for a judge when I was in law school, so I spent
Okay.
a summer down there. Like I said, my brother lives down there, so I've been down there like many times. He lived in Chandler.
Mhm.
It
Now
really
he
is
lives
almost a perfect.
in Queen Creek. Yeah,
It's almost a perfect yin to like Seattle's yang in terms of like weather,
Oh, for
proximity.
sure.
what else? Like we just went to. I just got back from Palm Springs yesterday. Palm Springs is awesome too, but what I like about Phoenix is that it's more urban, right? So there's just more stuff to do.
Yeah.
Palm Springs is a little sleepy.
I
you
love
know?
Palm Springs. I used to be. This was forever ago. I was stationed in 29 Palms.
Okay.
It's about an hour and a half north when I was in the Marines, and we'd drive down to go shopping, to go to a restaurant and everything, and it was like, you know, where I was in 29 Palms. I don't know why they call it that. There are not 29 palm trees. There's more, but I mean, it was prototypical of being right outside the main gate of a Marine Corps base. You know, there's used car dealerships. There were some other places
yeah.
you don't go to, and it was good. At the time, we had dirt bikes and quads, so we'd load up and go outside the gate, ride, have fun, you know, stay out of trouble.
Yep.
But if you wanted to go somewhere nice, yeah, your Rancho Mirage, Palm Springs, and it was great.
Yeah, it's
Loved it.
nice. It's nice, just it's nice to be able to go to a concert or go to I don't know, any of the other things that are happening in a bigger city.
Yeah,
You know?
yeah, it was great. Um,
Yeah.
Yep.
So we're looking. I'm trying to figure out the logistics behind some of that stuff, and
yeah.
the first time's always the hardest because we would probably do some kind of a short term.
Well, for me,
you know.
it's like it covers the debt, which is
Yeah.
nice. And then in the good season, I got several months ahead in the note,
Right.
which was really nice because you get that buffer preparing for when it gets. It's funny, you think the off season is like up here, it's cold and wet. Well, the off season down there is when it's the hottest.
Right.
And it helped out a lot having a good buffer in that loan.
Sure.
Not have to worry about making the payment if nobody was renting it, because they had a streak of 21 days of 110 degree plus
Yeah,
weather.
I remember that.
Nobody's renting there. They're like, hey, I'll wait till it cools down to 90,
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
or 100. So that was good to have. I like the property. It's in Tempe. It's a pool and a hot tub, and it's just amazing to go down there. It's not like
Quick flight.
100%.
quick flight, super happy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
16 minutes from the
And when
airport.
it's unbearable
you know?
there is
Yeah.
when it's amazing here.
Right.
Yes.
Right. That's the beauty of it. It's the flip.
Yeah.
Like, I'm in such a better mood for having spent like 3 days in the sunshine.
Yeah.
This
I can't-
last weekend.
I can't
It's
tell
like a
if-
significant difference.
I can't tell if way down the road I am only in Seattle for the summers or if I'm just gone for the winters. I can't tell which direction I would go.
I mean, there's a reason, that I looked at and I bought one. I mean, what I wanted to buy back when I first thought about it, translated to more expensive now, but that's why I invest in real estate too.
Yep.
So I really enjoy the property. Got, like I said, switched over to a property management company now. I think can give more attention to it,
Yep.
which is good. Had a great agent. Again, met her through our core training. Really a bulldog for me.
Who's the
Which is
agent that
great.
you work with?
Angela Tauscher.
I don't think I met her.
Yeah, she owns Rover Realty.
Okay.
There in Mesa.
Got it.
Just a hustler.
Yeah.
I mean, she's a hard worker, so it was really nice to have her eyes down there.
Yep.
It's hard for someone in our core group not to be.
It's a good referral base.
Yeah,
Hey,
it
take
really
care of my
is.
friend, and you pretty much know that.
The person's going to do a great job.
Yeah,
Always.
you're going to get updates. They're going to say, hey, thanks. This is a great experience. Yeah, it's wonderful.
In working with somebody out of state, is it you just give them like a laundry list of the things that you are sort of looking for in like
Did.
neighborhood sort of? This is what I. This
Well,
is-
initially I said, hey, I want to be in Scottsdale, and then she goes, well, hey, you know what? If you change the zip code out of Scottsdale, it's going to be 20% cheaper.
Right.
And totally right.
Yep.
I don't feel like I lost anything.
Yeah.
Because the way it is down there, you're 20 minutes from anything.
100%.
They've built it out
Yep.
that way. So I told her I want a pool. I prefer a Rambler, which are super common down
Yes.
there. And with all the talks about the changes in short-term rentals in Maricopa County, I didn't want one in an HOA.
Right. No HOAs. That's me
Yeah,
too.
I wanted a nicer neighborhood,
Yep.
And in the neighborhood, you'll see a house that, boy, they really could work on it, even that one's an eyesore, but for the majority of them, they're nice homes.
Yeah.
But I didn't want any restriction. Like,
Yep.
I'm buying it for this one purpose. I don't want anybody to come in and go, hey, we had it on the books a long time ago that we don't want short-term rentals, and now we're going to enforce it.
Right.
Sorry for your loss. I didn't want that to happen.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they could change their minds too in an instant.
Yeah, and what they've always said is, like, if it didn't have an HOA ever, you won't be able to install one.
Right.
And I'm like, okay, I like that, But if it had an HOA and now they wanted to add that to it, they could.
Right.
And so that's going to change a lot of people's stuff, because I know a lot of people are operating under the radar.
Yep.
Well, they require a short-term rental license.
Yep.
They require a permit, I think, from both City of Tempe and Maricopa County. So keeps us legal.
I heard Bearded Brandon talk about it on Bigger Pockets, like short video. He thought, or he's not part of Bigger Pockets anymore, but just one, a recent, video he did. And I think he made an interesting point. He said he thinks that if you want to be successful in the STR game moving forward, it'd be an area and a property that would do well as an STR that somehow has STR restrictions, but you can work with them.
I think that would be great, because
I actually found a property like that.
yeah, I think that would be great. But the way it works down there, I got explained to me several times, is there's a lot of part-time agents, and they'll go to list a property, and they won't have any title research done. So when they're offering it for sale, they're like, hey, basically buyer beware, do your own due diligence. Well, you don't know if there's one, and to get a title report later, like, were you aggressive enough to get your offer accepted? You might have waived that.
Yeah,
You know?
that's the biggest thing that people make mistakes of when they buy properties. They don't look at title reports. I could be as guilty of that at the beginning too, but you read those Schedule Bs, you read those special exceptions and
Yeah,
CC&Rs.
gotta pay attention.
Mhm.
Yeah. It's boring, but you'll find some stuff on there. Sometimes you're
I actually
super
get
grateful to uncover.
super jacked reading that kind of stuff. It sounds corny, because my point is that like when other people aren't paying attention and you are, it's like the most common thing you'll hear people say about a good deal in real estate is, well, if it's such a good deal, why hasn't someone else bought it? It's when you can see exactly why no one else has bought it, and you can see the thing that no one else can see.
Yeah, you find the secrets.
Yep.
Yeah.
And you're like, oh, geez, can you believe what I'm looking at?
Mhm.
So I saw a property recently in the, up north town, closer to Canada, pretty strong SCR market, Bellingham,
Nice.
right? And, and they have a really strict SCR rule, like single family homes, you're capped at 120 days a year, has to be your primary resident, except for one tiny little strip of mixed urban village area, right? Which is like Old Town.
Yeah.
And I'm looking at this beat up multifamily that's just been sitting on the market going down in price. And I'm like, that's in the zone. Like this thing could be there's no restrictions on how many you can have.
4
Nope.
Airbnbs right there. Huh?
Uh-huh. And like the gross revenue per year was probably close to like $200,000. And the thing's sitting on the market like at 6.
Wow.
Yeah. I mean, it's work, but still,
Yeah.
it's just example of like, okay, I can see it now, but
Yeah.
it wasn't advertised that way. Who's reading the code? No one's reading it. It's just that's the kind of stuff that people overlook.
Sometimes I've seen too where something might be, especially in the multifamily, where it's listed incorrectly on like the MLS or something.
Mm-hmm.
My friend Ben picked up a property. This is probably 10 years ago. Not even that, but picked it up, and it wasn't listed correctly. Like it wasn't on the MLS. It was only on a commercial brokerage site, and it could have been on a MLS.
Right.
But it was incorrectly listed. Picked it up, bought it a year later, sold it, and made $500,000. Just because he saw it and
Yeah.
people weren't looking for
Right.
that. It was so incorrectly done.
I'd say close to half of my properties I bought were on market, and so
Yeah.
what my highest best use was never exactly what they advertised it as.
True,
Yeah.
true.
Always.
Yeah, make some value added changes and stuff like that. It's super fun,
Yep.
So are you more of a traditional property owner? Like Keen does all this crazy stuff, right? Not what I would consider to be less
Conventional.
Well,
And-
I've seen what he does, and definitely learning from him by what he's doing. And now some of the changes where splitting up the property and adding an ADU, a DADU, things like that. Now the zoning has made its way over to where I live, and so
Right.
now there's the opportunities for it.
Oh, so trying to do more of that local.
I would,
Yeah,
it
there's probably
definitely now
opportunity
because it's
over
in my
there.
backyard, and if
Yeah.
I know about it and somebody else doesn't know about it, or I
Yeah.
get an investor that wants to buy this in hopes of doing that, it's like, yeah, hey, that is a big enough lot to split off.
Yeah.
The
Again,
secret to starting that space
Yeah.
is who went through the trouble of building that shit for a different reason, and the market has not adjusted for it. So, like the city of Kent passed an ADU code that pretty much mirrors HB 1337, and within a couple of months, I saw 2 different houses with backyard ADUs in them, both split entry homes where you could easily make the house live like a house plus ADU in the basement.
Yeah.
And already had a detached ADU in the back, and the houses were ugly, outdated, and I'm looking at this thing. I'm like, this thing is a hop, skip, jump, and away from being a triplex inside a low-density residential neighborhood, right? And it's this thing, and that one of them sold last year for I want to say like $550. Can you imagine a triplex in Kent for $550?
Yeah.
Right? And the thing's already done, right? Like you already had a kitchenette in the basement. All you have to do is like put laundry on a different floor, just like sprinkle fairy dust on it. So that's why my first tip to anyone who's going to get in that space is that mid-housing stuff starts to come into your area. People immediately get drawn to build, but building is expensive and
It is.
lengthy. And finding stuff that's already done adds a lot, I think is a shortcut. Plus, sometimes you'll find something where something's already done and you can still add addition to that. It's like the one I saw that sold for like $550. It was like $555 in Kent. There was enough room in the backyard to add another one.
Right.
We
did a lot of those. I have no problem admitting it now. We did a lot of those back in the day without any kind of permits, because you could get your electrical and everything done through L&I, and L&I and the building department didn't talk to each other. And so I remember buying one time. It was a duplex plus a cottage on one lot, and these are in certain parts of Bremerton, I mean, these houses are now 110, 120 years old too.
So they're still legal. They're just
They're still
not
legal, they're good.
conforming. Mm-hmm.
So we added another unit in the basement, did the correct ingress, egress windows and all that, made sure it was safe. And we didn't have to go change what it was classified as the zoning. The city caught up and just it went from being, a duplex plus an ADU to now it was regulated like it's 4 units.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, but they got the taxes on it too.
Mm-hmm.
Great properties.
Yeah.
Yep. Yep. Finding something that already has something you can work with, and then kind of just finishing it. There's always some guy who overbuilt some detached shop with with power insulation so he could work on his car, a half bath for his man cave so he could go to the bathroom and wash his hands while working on a car and go back into the house.
Yeah.
And you're like plumbing, electrical, insulated building, permitted, and now I got to just,
Yeah. Make living space. It's pretty easy. Yeah.
Pretty much. And so there's such a hack in that. So that's great. And so when you go out of state and you do your research, I mean, Arizona, I don't think necessarily has the best cap rate anymore, right? That was kind of more of a second home.
No, it was kind of, second home, make this work and cash a little bit that way. When I'm ready to be down there full time, I don't have to compete with higher prices. Because, again, like any market, I'm thinking, in 10 years, what's it going to be worth? Well, let's add 20% to that. Mm-hmm. So if I can get a 20% discount and already hold the property, that's what I chose to do.
Mm-hmm.
But if I'm looking at other areas where I'm not going to be personally trying to use it as a second home or vacation home, I look for characteristics like what I have in Kitsap. The major employer is the government, is the Navy.
Mm.
We kind of joke. I mean, world peace is not breaking out. There's a $13 billion aircraft carrier that's coming in 2025, a brand new one. There's decommissioning a 50-year-old carrier, which is going to take a long time, have a lot of people, and they've also allocated close to $10 billion for seismic and retrofit and all the work on the shipyard dry docks and all those things. There is so much money coming in. There's a lot of apartment construction that came up too. Well, nobody ever dreams of going, hey, I really want to rent that apartment. Nobody ever thinks that.
Right.
So to buy into a house like that, there's such solid employment base.
Isn't that the markets that were really strong in the Great Recession? I remember Texas was really good. There's a large military base there.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, Bremerton. Bremerton is the second largest naval base in the entire West Coast, I think. Behind San Diego, I think.
I think it's larger than San Diego.
Is
because
it?
Now with the shipyard and subbase Bangor and Keyport, all those tied together, Naval Base Kitsap, I mean, it's huge.
Yeah, it's a big base.
So, I mean, there's new carriers coming in that are super expensive, and so you've got crews like that. You've got contractors that are going to do work on these things because it's not just an enlisted Navy person or something like that that's going to be performing all the maintenance. They've got technicians. I mean, these things are amazing,
Yep.
So all the technology that's coming in, well, it really made me think like, hey, there's always going to be a buying base, a well-employed buying base. So when I looked outside of Bremerton for other opportunities,
cheapest areas that have the biggest military bases.
Inland, you're going to find they're close to Air Force bases.
Mm.
So Great Falls, Montana, they're close to an Air Force base. I picked up 2 properties that, our basic rule of thumb for cash flow is like 1% of the purchase price, at least.
Yeah.
Well, they're getting 1.25 to 1.5 without any fixes up.
That's interesting. I've heard about the 1% rule. I've never bought anything that met the 1% rule.
The 1% rule is hard, I think, to
yeah.
Depending on where you're looking, though,
hard
you
to
can
find
it, but
yeah. And so
so basically, the 1% rule is $1,000 rent for every $100,000 you spend.
Yes. And so when I saw that, and I'm looking at prices, what that would have been for that rental income would have been 30% more, 40% more at home. And so I was like, okay, that's great. And then did some fix-ups, got some better tenants. We put money into the properties.
When you're purchasing those, how do you just like stack cash until you can get the next one? Like what's your
a little leverage and stuff like that.
Now that you have a few, you can sort of pull a little bit out.
The first one started with a HELOC on my first house and a little bit of savings and take a lot of 401k.
Yeah.
Kind of put money together to have a first down payment, and then it just kind of kept going. And I worked with a great mortgage lender that ended up hiring me. Super smart guy, and he figured out how, hey, we'll take a little cash out of here, we'll do this. And, because he was, had personally invested in real estate, a good plan.
Yeah.
So I got money here, and I kind of leveraged, did some things, but I only had the money to leverage because I got into the investment arena in the first place.
Right. Yeah, we talk about this all the time. you just have to get started, and then
Yes.
the next thing will present itself, and you'll learn more, and the next thing will present itself, and you'll learn more. And
Yeah, you
just
get the
keep going.
mentality of looking for an investment, you will definitely find them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, it's the people that go, oh, well, must be nice to find it. Well, there's all the time I got, you know, a good agent looking for me. There's a time when I see, like, maybe it was back in the day when the first sale sign from the realtor was already laying on the ground. Like, I wonder if that's a better deal sign.
Mhm.
Just different things. But
Yeah.
I definitely spent time looking for properties. And then if you're talking about it, you know, a couple of people find out, hey, you invest in real estate. Hey, man, my buddy wants to sell this house. Well, I'll go look at it.
There are
Yeah.
there are hidden gems
For
if
sure.
you'll just do research. So
Mhm.
I'll throw one out there. This is for free. Anyone who wants to invest in King County. King County, long before HB 1110 and 1337, has its own cottage code. People don't know this.
Yeah.
And their cottage code, it's a multifamily thing, so it's not, they don't subdivide it, but you can site condo them,
Yeah.
right? It doubles your density. And they also say that the restrictions for the cottages being how big they can be, which are bigger than most ADUs, by the
Right.
way. 1,500 square feet, I think, is where they cap them at.
Oh,
So
it's
pretty good
nice and
size,
big, yeah.
right? That restriction in size does not apply to the original house. The original house could be non-conforming. So
Okay.
this is unincorporated King County. Unincorporated King County includes part of Renton, where you're in Issaquah schools, a gap between Kirkland and Redmond. I mean, there are some high-value unincorporated King County areas.
Yeah.
And so if you just said, I'm going to go find every parcel that is exactly 50% more than the minimum lot size, 50%, because the minimum cottage size or the minimum cottage community in King County has to be at least 3 units. So if it's 1.5 of what you need, then if you develop it as a cottage, it goes from 1.5 to 3, and then you can add 2 more on top of the original house without
Right.
disrupting the original house.
That's
You
huge.
could build 2 smaller size houses on that same parcel,
Mhm.
turn them to site condos, and now you have 3 and no one's doing this. No one's doing this. People are
No.
running around doing the daddies in Seattle. And look, there's a reason why Seattle is such a great market for it, because the density, the people are willing to live in smaller houses, are okay with street parking. So yes, some of these areas are kind of suburban, and it's a newer product, so it takes longer for them to kind of adopt to it.
Mhm.
But these are high value areas,
Oh, yeah.
you know, and to be able to not disrupt the original home, add a couple more on top of it, right? Newcastle has one also, you know, and it's just people don't read, you know.
No.
You have to, you know.
Yeah, there's value in your backyard.
It's funny when I've reached out to some of these municipalities and asked them about it. They go, you know, it's funny. We passed that a while ago, and they'll tell me like, no one's really done
They're
anything.
not taking advantage
People
of it.
are not creative developers. They just
No.
copy paste what they see other people doing, and there are hidden opportunities out there that people just don't act on.
Mhm.
Truly.
Yeah. No, I mean, I know a couple people there, they might divide the lot, you know, and some people right now are just dividing the lot, getting that set up on its own, and getting the permits and everything for the next phase, and then selling that as is.
That's me.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I
because
just sold-
I think you'll make just as much as that point as you
I
would
just-
building it out. you know?
I will see. We'll probably wrap it up here. But I was working on like 4 or 5 AD projects in Kirkland.
Mhm.
One, I got to permits. We sold the house for the same price we paid for it, and we sold the condo lot. So it's like not even a real lot. It's just a condo piece
Yeah.
of dirt, but with permits
Mhm.
for like $345.
Yeah.
Yeah. Didn't build a thing. And then bought one at the top of the market. House has probably gone down 8% in value, but we're about to get an offer in for 170 grand more than we paid for the whole thing, because brought it to the same permit process,
Yeah.
right? And just going to sell it to some developer, and they could finish it. You know, we could finish it all the way through and make more money on it, but it's like, well, whatever. It's a good development flip.
It's
Yeah.
really good. Yeah.
Yeah. So I didn't go into those planning to do it that way, but
Mhm.
it's definitely planned out that way, you
Yeah.
know. But people just they overlook opportunities, and there's opportunities all over the place.
I agree.
So you're doing a lot of 1% rule stuff. Interesting. Does the 1%
Well, you
rule
can-
in those markets
you can
apply
find
to
it.
multifamily?
Oh, those are multifamily, yeah.
Okay.
And that's what made them so attractive.
Mm.
You know, being out of state, I would prefer that, you know, if it's a fourplex, you know, I've got one vacancy rather than a single family that's got 100% vacancy.
Right.
So I like that. It came with tenants. We've upgraded tenants, you know, because we've upgraded the properties and say, you know, the rent increase is going to be this.
I had to do the
Still
math.
at market value.
What happens if I later on 1031 all of my assets into multifamilies that all met the 1% rule? That'd be
Be pretty happy.
yeah.
Yeah.
You would crush.
Yeah.
There's a reason the 1% is the 1% because it's hard to find.
It
You
is.
know,
Yeah.
it's,
So when I saw it, I'm
is a
like, wait a
good-
minute. What's it get for rent?
It is
Hey,
a
this is what it
good
is.
back of hand tool.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Very quick
because
analysis, you know.
yeah, it won't show you everything, but
Yeah.
It definitely tells you a lot, and that's hard to find.
Mm-hmm.
The other place out of state that we're focusing on, even investing and lending. I'm looking for my first purchase there, but it's crazy to say I've been busier sending out pre-approvals for our investors buying in that area is Dayton, Ohio. It's a
I've been hearing a
suburb.
lot about Ohio.
I'm loving it.
Yeah.
It's clean. It's affordable. I helped somebody
Nothing
buy.
sexy, right?
No, it's bread and butter. I helped
Yeah.
somebody buy a fully renovated 4-bedroom, 1-bath house. House is probably 100 years old. They had the sewer scoped and everything. It's just a good, solid house. They paid $85,000.
Wow.
I think it was getting 11 or 1200 in rent. So they're still
Is
making
it military
money.
town?
Yes.
Hmm.
But surprisingly enough, military aren't. You would think every airman out there would be like, hey, because the Air Force doesn't move people like
Yeah.
the Navy and the Marine Corps.
Mhm.
And they're trying to reduce that as well. But the Air Force, there's a good chance you might be at like 2 or 3 duty stations in 20 years.
Mm-hmm.
Where Marine Corps, different, assignments or whatever is going to take you all over the country.
Navy feels like it's very
Navy for sure.
It's very transitional, right?
Mhm.
Like people will transition in and out a lot.
Well, and that's why I've got lending licenses in states that the Navy's going to send their people to.
I've
So
always
I
felt
can
like the
help 'em.
military cities don't represent tons of growth, but they create this a massive safety net.
Super stability.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so, which makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
I like that area because we're seeing really good prices, really good, and really good rents. And we've helped a lot of people. We've helped a lot of our realtor friends buy out there too.
Someone told me yesterday, and I'd never heard this before, but as soon as he said it, I knew what the philosophy was. He said, when markets are good, invest on the coast. When markets are bad, invest in the middle.
It makes sense.
And I was like, you mean like the middle areas end up being a lot more stable, higher rents, less
yeah.
value
You don't see the
adjustments?
massive appreciation, but you go out there and these are solid properties. You don't like where we are, especially in Kitsap. You go any direction for 20 minutes, run into water somehow. You're gonna want into salt water, a lake, wetland. You go Midwest, they can just keep building, and then just keep building some more. It's like Arizona makes it so attractive. They can keep expanding.
Right.
You can keep moving there. Well, Seattle, man, that's why we have so much density and different ways to build more units.
Yeah, very interesting.
That's why
Very
it's
interesting.
expensive here too.
That is true. It's sought after.
Yeah.
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 See, I've put all the focus of like, if I can get my properties to cash flow at all, and do a BRRRR model of 100% capital reinvested back in my pocket in a high value area, I just tee myself up to enter those markets later on a tax exchange.
Oh, and you'll
and
do
just
well.
crush, right?
Yeah,
just
you'll
like
do
build
well.
up all this capital and then shift it.
Yeah, exchange it into something else. And, Yeah, yeah.
When
I've had
to
a-
do that?
I had a client that have done that.
Mm-hmm.
Come in they make a trust and they're signing like 15 deeds, and just because I'm curious, I'll just be like, "How'd you do that?" And he's like, "Well,
Yeah.
I bought a couple houses and they really appreciated it, and I rolled those into more. Those appreciated, and I rolled it into like a little small apartment building.
Yeah.
And I rolled that into this thing. I'm like, oh yeah, it's the same thing. You
Yeah.
just pretty soon you're gonna look up and you're gonna say, well, we can do that.
Yeah.
Well, I think it's the mindset. Yeah.
Yeah.
You just start thinking like, hey, this. And one thing we've brought up lately, we've been talking about in our little investor club, is like, hey, you've got a good property. It's cash flowing for you right now. Can you sell that and get something better? Can you upgrade? And we're seeing those opportunities. Hey, this is cash flowing. It's good
Yep.
for you. If you never sold it, you'd still be better off than you are today, obviously. But selling it and exchanging for something better, lower cost, buy more units, get better rent.
Right.
It's the ability out there. Because if you sold a good property out here, say it's a fourplex in any one of these counties in Western Washington, people want to buy it, period. They're going to buy it. They're going to pay good money for it. And you could always buy something in a less expensive area. It's funny when I think people always go, oh, there's going to be like the doom and gloomers, like there's going to be a crash, or man, I hope the market crashes. I'm like, well, anytime I've hoped for something to happen without just breaking, working so hard to achieve that goal, it never does. Like, I hope I lose weight. But when I had 2 donuts in the same day, I'm not doing everything I possibly could to make that happen. So when
Right.
people say, I want the market to crash, I'm like, so are you like destabilizing the economy or something? Like, are you making more inventory? You're not doing that. You're just wishing it would happen. And I've never made money off of wishes.
Yeah, I think that it's what you should wish for is perspective for opportunity.
Yes.
You know,
Yeah, you should wish for opportunity.
You know,
You just have to go find it.
I'll hit a couple of bullet points, not to get too far into like my Alice in Wonderland rabbit hole thinking. But have you ever heard of fractured condos?
No.
So fractured condos are like old developers who never finished developing their condos, and so they sell, and they don't always are the ones who sell them. They very often get taken back by the bank,
Mm-hmm.
and then they have to be resold as like they're traded like multifamily.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, imagine someone took like a 100-unit apartment building, convert it to condos. They sold through 40 of them, 60 are left. Developer didn't finish it. Bank forecloses. They
Turn
dump
them to
all
rentals.
60 of those
Yeah.
as a multifamily. Another investor buys them at some kind of discount, whatever. And it's like, I was just thinking a different version of my play would be like, I've heard that those have been traded since the Great Recession and haven't really been broken up and sold as individual units since then.
Interesting to find.
And those loans only have 5-year balloons on them.
Oh, yes, they got to turn.
Yeah, they're not like the normal multifamilies that can have as long as a 7 to 10 year balloon feature. The financing for those typically has a 5-year balloon, and if
Yeah.
they have a 5-year balloon, it's like, how many of those could someone like you and I go look at and say, hey, you know, because I was actually helping John buy with like someone who bought some that way, and he's looking to sell them as individual units, and his son's a lender. And it was like, no, it's not warrantable, blah, blah, blah. I'm looking at it. I'm like, it's already phased. Sell these ones first, then do these ones as a pre-sale, and then you'll be at 50% for the whole project, and you can sell these.
Yeah, and
Like-
you'll get agency financing. You'll
Right.
make money. Yeah.
100%. I remember looking at that thinking to myself, like, you know, I feel like there's pressures right now for that kind of an asset class.
Oh, for sure.
You know.
Especially when it comes to condos. We don't have nearly opportunity in condos either. But what we're learning with all the different changes in condos, boy, they're great. A well-maintained condo project is going to command good prices, and ones that are not are strictly going to go non-warrantable side.
There's two reputations about condo investing that makes most people not invest in it. And even Thatch will say condos are not good investments. I know what he's referring to. One is the restrictive HOAs.
Yes.
And then the other one is the cash flow piece with the assessments, right? And Robert Kiyosaki is pretty well known out there to talk about how he had some, you know, frustrations investing in a condo. My thing is that when like almost all my rentals are condos, but the difference is that all but maybe one of them, I made them into condos.
Yeah.
So it's
Again, you're looking for opportunity. Yeah.
that's right. And so people talk about HOAs and restrictions. I'm like, hey, when you're making the association, then you're making the rules, you know?
That's very true.
And that's actually one of my workarounds for the STR market, because in certain cities I have strict STR rules. A lot of times they only apply to single family and they don't apply to condominiums. And so, you know, that's kind of how I can operate a bunch of Airbnbs in the city of Kirkland. City of Kirkland says you're not supposed to have more than 180 days, has to be your primary residence, but in condos it's up to the HOA.
Yeah.
So
it's like a mini jurisdiction.
Yeah. And if you make the jurisdiction your own, then you can write whatever you want.
That is good, yeah.
You know? And if you condo a single family home from a detached ADU, the people get to rent a single family home asset, so they're getting what they want out of it, but you're meeting all the city's requirements because it's a condo. Yeah. And it's that kind of hack that really can help you kind of stay ahead of competition. But people, hey, at the end of the day, you got to do your research.
Yeah.
And that stuff exists in everything. Exists in STR world. It exists in the multifamily space.
Everything, yeah.
You know, I hear the popular thing I've heard people talk about are like hotel conversions to multifamily, which I think are kind of like losing some steam at this point. But I think that was a really big thing during the pandemic.
I saw one. I was just in Reno, and I saw one. It was next to this other business, and it was great looking. I was like, that was a motor lodge, you know, from back in the day. It was probably 50, 60 years old. And they'd updated it, and you could tell they're going through everything. And I was like, man, they're going to kill it with this little place, you know?
Yeah.
I think it was probably 14, 16, 20 doors, something like that. But they were putting money into it. They were going to have, you know, small one-bedroom rentals and stuff like that, made affordable housing. I don't know what they paid for it, but it was really a good-looking project.
So you've been investing in real estate for over 20 years. What would you tell your former self to do differently if you started over again?
I would tell my former self to not have to be hands-on. Like, it doesn't have to be in my own backyard. You know, I wouldn't be so scared. And I can tell you why, is because there was a 27 unit apartment building years ago. This was probably 2000. It was before the bust. It was like 2007, early 2007, in Spokane. and it was $290,000.
Hmm.
And it was like, okay, I'm looking for an apartment building. This is the one, right?
Yeah.
But I had the mentality that I was going to do all the work like I've been doing, and I missed out on a good opportunity.
Hmm.
I should have been like, cool, and
Wow.
start picking people out left and right.
25 units in Spokane for $290. Is that
It
what you
was
said?
unbelievable,
Wow.
and
I
I remember
have to say
going out
that.
to see it in person and toured a couple units. The whole thing needed to be redone, period.
Yeah.
But a bank would have lent money on that, would have taken my down payment, looked at it after improved value, done it. That was a perfect deal. And I passed on it because I was in Kitsap, not in Spokane. And it could have been anywhere in the country. It could have been, hey, it's in North Carolina here. The numbers were so good.
Hmm.
Spokane's got a great, economy. I mean, shoot, they're
Second
busy.
biggest city in the state, I think.
I think you're right. Yeah.
I think they're
Yeah.
number 2 right behind
Yeah.
Seattle. They're ahead of Tacoma and Everett.
They've
for
got an Air
population.
Force base. Imagine that, And I should have taken a little more leap of faith. That's all.
Yeah.
I mean, there's been properties. When you miss out on a deal and all of a sudden it goes pending, you're like, wait a minute, my offer got played against another one.
Yeah.
I could probably think there's 3 or 4 chances that happened.
I hate it when
And
I
that's
see
what it is.
something and I think
Yeah.
it looks like something, but I don't know how to analyze it. And then only on accident later on, I get to find out what I really miss. And I'm like, holy fuck, I missed on that.
It's frustrating,
So-
but also it's easier to win in real estate than lose, I think.
Yeah. It
Did
was,
you do good diligence? I mean, you got a clear title, you had a home inspection.
Yeah.
Is this thing solid? What's a really good idea of what a rent could be?
So it's called this
Yeah.
like dumb luck that I would actually meet a person, become friends with them to prove me that I was an absolute dumb shit. I saw this property that just screamed that this looks like a big version of what I should be doing.
Yeah.
It was a lodge, so it wasn't a multifamily, in Ashford, Washington. It consisted of like one big lodging house and I would say like 12 or 13 cabins. And it was sitting on the market
Oh, man.
at like 1.1, 1.2.
Yeah.
And they had full live-in features in all of them, like little houses. I'm like, God, that looks like it would be a really, but I don't know anything about that market. Obviously, there's some kind of short-term rental basis there because it's
Something
a
going
motel,
on, yeah,
right?
yeah.
But I'm like, but I don't know anything about that market. It's rural, it's far, it's 3 hours away. Nah, whatever, right? So I just watch it, and eventually it sells for like, whatever, barely $1 million. Then I remember seeing a different one that was cheaper, sold for around 800, and it had like 3 houses on it, so much smaller,
Mm-hmm.
and it sold.
Yeah.
Years later, I'm helping this gal who's introduced to me from one of my agents, who's like, so one of John's buyer's agents,
Right.
Who's Alec is starting to do like build his own VIP group. Says, meets this client and says, "Oh, I know the perfect lender for you," and introduced him. And the 3 of us have a buddy lunch, and she's the gal who bought that thing, and she was having a hard time moving it to permanent financing. This is the one with the 3 houses on it.
Mm-hmm.
So she's sitting on that thing at hard money, and she's like, "I need to refinance this. Can you help me with that?" I'm like, "Sure." And I'm looking at the numbers, and she put the thing under its own partnership. So
Mm-hmm.
I'm looking at the cash flow, whatever it's called, 8825. It looks like a Schedule E,
Yeah.
right? And I'm like, "Am I reading this right? This says that you're cash flowing positive on your hard money loan." She's like, "Yeah." I'm like, "You're 3 houses in Ashford, Washington.
Yeah.
You have not refinanced
12,
out of it yet.
13%, yeah.
Yes, and you are cash flowing positive." She's like, "Yeah, I want to refinance it so my cash flow's better." I'm like,
Yeah.
"Tell me about that market."
Mm-hmm.
Turns out that she will make somewhere around 40 to 50,000 per unit. The bigger one's like 60,
Mm-hmm.
right? So she makes around $13,000 to $14,000 a month gross after expenses around 11 or 12, and her hard money payment's like 8. So yeah, she's making money, And I go back, I'm thinking like, for like 300 grand more, it was like 15 of them.
6 more units
And
or 7.
even
yeah.
though she had a pretty good sized house on hers, the big house on that one hotel I was referencing was like a big lodging house that was kind of meant to be like the place, like a restaurant. Everyone could
Yeah.
So if you just turn that into one big house
Yeah.
and get rid of the whole like check-in lodge area and just made them all operate like a boutique hotel, I was doing the math on it. I'm like, let's say you deleveraged it and sold off like half of them and then operate the other half as like no leveraged Airbnbs. It was like 400 gross revenue and no debt. And I'm like, what the
I know. See, those are the ones like I think that apartment building years later sold for like close to 2.
Can you imagine making like
Oh,
25 to 30 grand net
Yeah.
profit a month on a zero debt position on 100 on a Burr type acquisition? You have no financing into it, and you're making that kind of cash flow on your retained assets. I'm
Yeah,
just
you only
like,
need one.
I'm like, God damn it.
Oh,
So
I
it's
agree.
like, okay, now pay attention. now to some of those opportunities, and so yeah, it's sometimes you'll see that stuff later. I mean, what was the chances that I'd remember that property so explicitly, and she would end up being a client of mine, and now a friend. She does like design work. Because she owns like a shout out to the Material Bar, Kirsten Cobb. It's they do kitchen and bathroom remodel designs based out of Lakewood.
Nice.
And so she's helped me and my wife do some designing for some of our Airbnbs.
That name even sounds familiar, but yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it's tough. That's your biggest aha. Wish you would have done something sooner.
Yeah, I think you kind of mindfuck yourself into like thinking that
You can totally overthink it.
Yeah.
I just had a young sailor. I can say that because I'm 20 years older. He was lined up to buy a condo in Bremerton, $218,000, VA approved condo, which VA approved condos are a lot more rare.
Right.
$218,000, good rate. As VA goes, I mean, he was only going to use so much of his entitlement, as it was so cheap, and he got cold feet about the HOA and restrictions about parking. Even though the parking wasn't enforced, it was a rule on the books, and that he let people that didn't even own a place, that rented condos, talk him out of it, put the bad magic in his head. He backs out of it, and I was telling him, like, don't buy this. You're buying a piece of property for $1,500 of your own money. Let's say you don't like it. Let's say there is a problem with the parking. Turn around and make it a rental.
Yeah.
Use your VA again. Buy another property. You can have more than one VA loan at a time.
Yeah.
I've done 3 at one time for one guy. I don't think we'll see that again just because of prices, but
Yeah.
do this. Do this all day long. And he let some bad non-owners talk him out of it.
What the biggest mistake people can make is ask people who don't own real estate about real estate advice.
Exactly.
We've had shows about this too. It's about the fear of what it means to own something,
Mm-hmm.
right? And the comparisons I gave about the responsibility of owning rentals is that the closest thing is, let's say you bought like a fourplex. Let's say it's a pretty beat up old fourplex, one that CapEx expenditures are going to be coming.
Yeah, right.
The responsibility of managing that property is about the same as the first time you're a car owner.
Mm-hmm.
It feels like a lot. You get oil changes every 3 months, filling gas every single week,
Yeah.
right? Like at the
Couple years later, you
most,
had to get some
a small
tires.
multifamily might feel like that. But even after a while, it's going to drop to be below that.
Yeah.
And so people freak out. They can't manage it. I'm like, do you own a car?
You can only replace so many dishwashers. Like you had 4 to replace.
You
After
for
the
sure
fourth one,
service
you're
your
pretty
car.
good.
You
Yeah.
for sure service your car more than like a fourplex would need service. That's
Right.
just the truth. Like
Yeah.
you're not going there to fill gas in your freaking fourplex every single week,
No.
right? But yet you're doing that for your car, and we act like it's such a big deal.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, oh, well, I got to remember to clean up the gutters. What, once a year, right? I mean,
Right.
you do oil changes every 3 months.
Yeah.
So, and you have to drive your car into the oil change shop.
Yeah.
Changing the gutters is like putting on the calendar and calling the place,
Yeah.
right? And people act, oh, and then things break, it's a surprise. I'm like, well, whoever said you're supposed to treat 100% of your rent like it's income?
Right,
Just
right.
park
Yeah, you have
20%.
some reserves.
Yeah,
That's
park
how you'll
20%
feel
like it
better.
didn't exist.
Yeah.
That's what, the problem with rentals is that there's such a good business that most of the time there aren't expenses that you somehow fool yourself into thinking that they're never going to come.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the biggest mistake people make. You just take a percentage.
Yeah.
It's also the only business that consistently you can get a pretty good manager for a small percentage of the revenue. People think, oh, I'm going to start this business, and then I'm not going to want to run it anymore, so I'm going to hire a manager to run it, a restaurant, mechanic shop, whatever. And most of the time that doesn't work,
No.
right?
I can tell you from experience, I had 2 coffee shops and I had a manager. I sold the businesses. I kept one of the sites where the coffee shop is, leased that to the new owners. I make just as much money from being a landlord as I did running 2 businesses with 14 people.
Somehow people love that fantasy in their head.
Oh, they always think a coffee shop, oh, it's a cash cow. Well, if you're working there and probably taking your money in cash as the owner-operator, it's a cash cow.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's the best paying barista job you can have.
Yes.
Owner operating it.
And I hear people all the time, hey, man, you had experience with that. I'm thinking about opening a coffee shop here. I'm like, let me give you my best advice. Don't.
Right.
Don't.
Build the building, lease it out to somebody who can invest all
My
the
wife
money.
still has a dessert shop that operates that way, and we do have it to a manager. And we've actually successfully done the thing that most people will think of, and it's for all the work and heartache we went through and the money we make off of it. It's like We can do like 3 Burfer deals,
Yes.
make the same cash flow, and it's just
I
like,
love just getting the rent. They're like, hey,
Yeah.
something broke. We got to fix. Cool. Let's just fix it.
Was that the brilliance of McDonald's? Was like not is like open
they're in
franchises.
the real estate game. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, for sure. I mean,
Yeah, they're the second biggest property owners behind like the Catholic Church or something like that. I can't remember what this.
I think
is.
so. I think you're right.
Yeah.
Yeah, they own tons.
Yeah.
They own
Yeah.
tons. And then they
Yeah.
franchise it out. They just have a process.
Yep, it's brilliant. So what's the next thing for you then? Well, let me ask you this: if you had enough cash flow, would you stop doing loans?
Yeah, of course.
You would?
Yeah.
That's very.
I enjoy
interesting.
doing loans. I mean, if it got up to, I would spend more time with my family. I mean, if I had enough positive cash flow, I'm not there yet. I would probably find ways to give back more to the community.
Mm-hmm.
Be more involved in these things that need our help.
I thought that if I had enough cash flow, I would only want to work with investors, doing the things that I did to get there.
Yeah.
And so my aha was to start creating that work now, so that way I've already kind of built my retirement. All I do is scale back hours later.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, the cash flow is something that I feel it's not going to change as long as I'm going to improve.
Mhm.
I'm going to raise rent more than my costs get raised. As I've still got tax increases, insurance increases, of course, are the biggest thing I've seen lately.
Yeah.
But no, I keep the rents going. The commercial properties are set kind of on a automatic 3% every 12 months. Cause for it helps me against inflation, and basically what that is, it just helps me against the increasing taxes and insurance.
Right.
Utilities for the most part, they're not too bad when they go up.
Yeah.
But no, they've been the best.
Very interesting.
Yeah.
He's almost doing everything different than what I'm doing.
Oh, I know.
Is
I
that
think
crazy?
it's different. I mean, if I was over here with the different, I would say opportunities and restrictions, then it's something to look at. Like you talk condos where I live. Where I live is called Tracy in Washington. It is a zip code. We don't have a stoplight. It's a village.
Yep.
That's probably the best way to do it.
Yeah.
And then where I work is in Silverdale, which is adjacent to it. Silverdale's unincorporated. Do you know how many condos there are in Silverdale? And Silverdale is popular. You've heard the name.
Yeah.
You know?
For sure.
Guess how many condos are in Silverdale?
How many?
7.
7.
Yeah.
7 condos, not 7 projects.
Hmm.
So it's a difference. Now I could talk all day long about, man, hey, Keen, have you, these manufactured home differences, and you're probably like, what is that,
Yep.
But where I am, I mean, that's affordable housing, and that's getting
I actually
pretty
think there's some
popular.
condo opportunities in those rural areas, but they have to be like waterfront and stuff like that. I mean, look, here's the thing
Definitely
about-
does, yeah.
I mean, think what's Seabrook? Seabrook is a condo community.
Oh, they're so smart.
Yeah, it's right next to Ocean Shores.
They just decided to build a huge piece of land, finance their own sewer so they could get the density.
Right.
I mean, they went big.
And that's a
when-
condo community.
Yeah, it's great.
They're all site condos.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're not detached single family lots. They're detached condos, but I mean, that's about as rural as it gets.
Last time I was down there was a piece of like the first lot that was there. It's an amazing waterfront view, high on a bluff. Trees are probably 200 feet in front of it. They're windblown. I mean, it's just a building lot, and I think it was going for $1 million.
Wow.
But they built a town. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Yep.
Very interesting. Very
Perfect
interesting.
example of there being the multiple ways
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
to do really anything. But real estate investing, there's 100 different ways to do it. They all work. You just got to find the one that you like,
Yeah.
or that suits you, suits your,
Yeah.
your sort of proclivities, what you're interested in. Not everybody likes to go read the freaking statutes and condo rules all over the place, like Keen the nerd. There's other things that you can do that are. That's what
Yeah.
he tells me all the time. I'm like, look, man, I don't want to do all that work. I want to be lazy. Will I take like a lower return? Maybe, but that's okay because I don't
Yeah.
have the time or the interest.
When I
to,
find
dive
I don't
into
even
that
care.
as much.
when I come up with a business plan that I could tell is like a hack, to me, it's like the equivalent of like an engineer inventing something. It's like I created
Right.
an opportunity that didn't exist just
Mhm.
from what I understand and know, and I can see as clear as as clear as you two are in front of me exactly where that would lead to.
Yeah.
And to execute it, just makes a lot of money.
Yeah.
The hard part is that like I've locked in so many of my properties at low rates on this kind of 100% BRRRR model already. I'm like, it actually makes more sense just to ride them out for a little bit.
It does.
Just let them,
Yeah.
that make sure they're as nice as they could be at the end, and then start trade. I mean,
Yeah, let them mature a little bit.
yep. Just let them season for a little bit, and
Yeah.
and then move out of them later. But
Yep.
but yeah, I know it sounds nuts, but I in some capacity would still be doing what I'm doing.
Yeah.
But the key is that like, what is it? Like, I think successful retirement is retiring from things you don't like. So
Yeah.
I'm already, yeah.
I would love to be, I mean, I'd be outside more. I'd be doing all this stuff. I mean, I go to work. I like what I do. Not going to beat my chest, but I think I do a good job. But boy, if money was no object, yeah, I'd be 100% giving back some way or the other to the community. I might become a teacher, you know, just a lot of different things.
Yeah.
A lot
Yeah.
of different things,
Yeah.
you know. Because if I was taken care of, which my number is, I have a certain number in mind that once I hit that, like it's above and beyond what I need today.
Right.
So it's a lot of insurance too.
Right.
But no, I'd be some way giving back or volunteering a lot or just doing something else.
Yeah.
I'd be doing the same thing.
I would too.
Yeah.
I'd be doing the same thing, but I would work a lot less. I'd spend more time on my projects.
Yeah.
Mhm.
But you know, but yeah, just staying in that space.
I already work a lot less
Yeah.
than I feel bad. I feel like a loser when I sit down with you sometimes.
But
because all I've really done with my business is basically I have every year I try to eliminate something that
Yeah.
I don't want to do
Yeah.
inside of my business, you know, and it just frees up a lot of time to really for me, which is work more on the business, but just doing only the things that I like, you know.
right.
A lot to be said for that. Yeah.
Yeah,
I guess
it's like
and
I
if
don't
that
do
was
any
the way, yeah.
I don't do any legal work anymore.
Yeah.
You know, so like sometimes I'm just sitting around. I can see everybody has full calendars with meetings and stuff, and I'm just trying to figure out like what's the next thing to do.
That's the hard part for me. If even though my investments would make more sense to season up and do, if I made a mad rush to maximize value of one and to do a trade and just did it multiple times, right now, I would probably land at like this around 30 to 40,000 cash flow figure.
Yeah.
And that is enough that at that point
Yeah.
I could literally be like, we'll go do another deal to keep that thing going. But I could, you know, I always criticize people for becoming a full-time investor too soon. But
I definitely criticize people that try to do it too soon before they're ready. I'm like,
Right.
hey,
you need some income to keep qualifying.
You do, you know, and your numbers weren't really that true.
Right.
You know, I mean, you didn't take into account a lot of things.
Right.
So I've seen people do it years and years ago. I kept this like spreadsheet of what this guy had. He tried to become an investor too quick, and he financed it all through credit cards and bad short-term loans and all that. And you know, this one group was like, hey, yeah, see if you can, you know, help this guy out. And I did the math. Like we went through and we listed all these liabilities and credit cards and their corresponding payments. It was like $135,000 in credit card debt, and it was $4,600 a month. And he quit his job working with the state, you know, good pay stub W-2 job that we can totally use for income, and then was a full-time investor, but wasn't on the deeds to any of these properties either. And I was like, man, you just, what I wanted to
soon.
tell him and what I, you know, could tell him is I wanted to tell him, go back to your job, claim bankruptcy, and come back in a few years. This is crazy what you got going here. Can't tell him that as a lender. That's not our advice to give. I just said, I can't help you, and this is why. You know, it's excessive debt to income ratio.
Yeah. It's crazy.
But he tried to do it, you know, so quickly and all through, you know, bad debt financing, you know, using some hard money here and there. I mean, we all do it. You know, it's a great, fast way. I mean, and you're not holding the money for a long time. But man, that credit card debt was just brutal.
Yeah.
And I didn't see a way to help him because being so maxed out on so many different accounts, that FICO score was so low too.
Yeah.
It was rough to see.
Yeah.
So it made me think, okay, you know, have a little more skin in the game, have better returns, you know, be a little more cautious. And that's definitely helped.
Yeah.
So he's gonna be my new best friend. Here's what's gonna happen. I will teach you how to make millions and millions of equity fast.
Done.
And then you will show me the best, highest, cash on equity returns to trade
Perfect.
into.
Trade, yeah.
And
Trade
then-
for sure. Yeah.
And then when we both get to 100,000 a month of cash flow, we'll both pick a vacation destination, and you'll pay for one, I'll pay for the other.
I like it. That's a deal. That's a deal. Yeah, yeah.
Because at the end of the day, I think that is really mastering the game, how to create tons and tons and tons of capital equity value, and how to get great, amazing cash on equity returns. Right? It's like, because most investments are not the best at both. So if you actually can learn to be great at both, if you could be average at both, you actually will get really rich.
I think it was Brian Buffini. He's a big real estate coach, and he talked, you're buying investment property for two reasons. You're doing it for cash flow or appreciation. And it's always stuck with me. And I'm like, yeah. And then when I can make it do both, it seems like an amazing thing.
Yeah. I have made mine do both. Like, I have a net positive cash flow with my equity, but those still will be better cash flow if moved into true cash flow plays.
Right.
And my philosophy to it was always like, hey, most people who invest in the stock market, they have to focus on growth and then shift it to cash flow to even make it. It's like value, try to get to a couple $1,000,000, and then that turns into whatever, 8 to 10,000 in cash flow. Right. And it's like, if they didn't have that strategy in mind, they're never going to get there.
Right.
I think in real estate, you can accidentally focus on cash flow right away and still get there because it's so efficient. But if you still apply that principle and knew how to do both really well, you can do extremely well.
Yeah.
And that's where I had these, relatively kind of loftier goals.
Yeah, a lot of investors I know that they're going for the extra cash flow, and all of a sudden they get notice of like an increased value. Like, hey, their agent said, hey, that place you bought for, $300 5 years ago, man, place just like it selling for like $550. And that's when they get the realization that they've got the extra equity. But if they were making cash flow from day one, like, cool, it runs like a clock. If anything goes wrong, I still get great money every month. They tend not to do it. I will tell you the best part. I have a property manager in Washington for my residential properties. Sarah Baldoff does a great job for me, to the point that I forget I own those properties until every month when she sends me, hey, here's what you're going to get deposited. I literally find myself forgetting, and they're not that far from my house. They're within, each one's within 15 minutes.
Yeah.
And it's just so hands off. Anything's got to be done. They're fixed, all that. Here's my net check. Cool. So I'm never focused on like, oh, what's that house doing? What's going on?
I only have one. My house is in North Carolina, but it's the same.
Yeah.
I just get it.
Is there military in North Carolina?
There is. There's a lot.
I don't know if there is where
I also hear that they have some of the
place
best beaches in the East Coast.
I'll tell you what, I was stationed in Virginia too, and Yorktown Beach, down in Virginia Beach, Norfolk, everything. It was really great being on the Atlantic.
Yeah.
So yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, we gotta wrap up.
Yeah.
Cool.
We got work to do.
Yeah.
Thanks for coming. It was awesome, as always. If you like this episode, give us a shout out. Share.
Why don't we get a real quick shout out for Tim? Your areas that you're licensed in are.
Yeah. How if people want to call you or get in touch with you, how can they do that?
My cell's the best way. 360-440-4899. I'm licensed Alaska, Hawaii, Washington, Oregon, Montana, Arizona, Colorado, Ohio, Illinois, Michigan, Georgia, Florida, Tennessee.
No Alabama?
Nope.
Is that one next? I hear Alabama's good too for cash flow.
I've heard it's hot. I got, Hawaii, Georgia, South Carolina too, and Florida, because the Navy's going to send their people there.
Yeah.
Being a Marine myself, I don't concentrate on where the Marine Corps is going to send people, because the majority of the Marine Corps cannot buy anything.
Right.
They're just too
Right.
young.
Yep.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. Cool. Well, as always, I am Chris.
I'm Keen.
This is the Business Barbershop Podcast. See ya.
See you guys.
Thank you.